Hi everyone, it's Taylor, and I'm back after a really long hiatus, and we are doing our first live show for the Austen Anonymous read along. This is a read along where we're reading each and every Jane Austen completed novel, one a month, and we're having discussions. I'm here with my co-host Kara from the Wild Book Garden, and we've got two co-hosts. So whichever one of you wants to go first, could you please introduce yourself, your channel or platform? What you post, what your relationship with Jane Austen is, and if this is your first time reading Northanger Abbey. So whichever one wants to go first. I know that was
You want me to? Okay, I'll jump in.
Go for it.
My name is Rhonda Gordon, and my channel name is R Alexandria. And it started out as doing some skits to Carlog with my blog. It's like a workplace humor blog, but then slowly turned into sort of booktube, and which I didn't know existed, but here I am. And Jane Austen is someone that I've been like in love with since high school, reading her books. And this is the one book that I had never read. So I'm glad that it was assigned to me because I said I was up to review any of them. And I'm glad that this was the one because now I'm obsessed. And I saw that you guys had a watch along, which I didn't get to do because I wanted to not confuse the movie and book, before this discussion. But that is next on my list. So I'm really excited and just thanks for including me. Happy to be here.
Oh, great. Love that. Olivia, would you like to?
Well, I'm Olivia from Olivia's Catastrophe, and my YouTube channel is bookish, basically, lots of reviews and just discussing books and fangirling about them. And as for my relationship with Jane Austen, I read all of her main novels except for Northanger Abbey, so it was my first time reading this one, and I'm really glad to finally get to it. I think I was delaying it because it was my last main novel, and I was like, I don't want to have no more new Austens to read, but yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Great. Kara, would you like to go, or would you want me to go? And
Sure, I can try. I am having some difficulties with my microphone, so I will do my very best to speak up. Taylor will be kind of guiding the discussion for this one, so hopefully it won't be too distracting. But yeah, my name is Kara. My channel is Wild Book Garden. I was thrilled when Taylor asked if I would be interested in co-hosting an Austen themed read-along. I was like, this is the dream come true, absolutely. And we've had so much fun discussing the Artemis Hall book, so I was really looking forward to working with Taylor again and getting to discuss with a bunch of different people. I'm really excited about it. I'm happy that both of you guys are new to Northanger Abbey. I think that's going to give us some great discussion points. And yeah, thank you everybody for joining in for some Austen goodness.
okay. So I'll go. So I'm Taylor from Peach Screen Taylor, and I post mostly about movies, or not movies, sorry, books, but sometimes I do a few movie or nerdy related content, but very rarely. So Jane Austen is my all-time favorite author. Love her to death. I was introduced to her at a very crucial age. Back when I was about 13, 14, Twilight was my favorite book, and then I came across Jane Austen and totally changed my perspective. Northanger Abbey, this isn't my first time reading Northanger Abbey. This is my second time. I did a massive research paper on Northanger Abbey a couple of years back when I was studying in London. So it's near and dear to my heart. I love it so much, and I'm excited to host the discussion for it. So we can hop right into the discussion. So I'd like to know, and whoever wants to go can go, what were your overall thoughts on the book? Like, avoiding spoilers right now, what did you think about the book as a whole?
Well, I'll just hop in if no one minds. I really liked it. I thought it was very refreshing. I've had like an up and down with Jane Austen's other books, namely the ones which kind of focus on a personality trait, like Pride and Prejudice, for example. But this one was just refreshing because the characters were so genuine and just nice, mostly for the most part. And I really liked that. It was a big change of pace.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It had like an overall sweetness, and I'm really into these days like crime novels and like heavy mystery novels. So to go back to something where things are going to be resolved, in one way or another, at least you'll get the satisfaction of like, like, so it ended up being a really like well-rounded book, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's one of the ones I have reread the fewest number of times, and it was really fun coming back to it because there were certain things that I had remembered about it that made it not one of my favorites. But rereading it this time, I enjoyed it so much more even than I was expecting to. Like the first time I read it, I was a little disappointed, and the second time I enjoyed it more. And I think this is the third time I've read it, and it's really fun. And I think it's really clever. And I think a lot of times this novel gets written off as almost like Jane Austen's practice run, like it's not as polished as some of her other work, and I can kind of see what people mean, but like the characters are really clever, like the writing is obviously it's really good, and I think it's just a really fun parody of a Gothic novel while still, I don't know, I feel like it kind of lovingly pokes fun at that, at those traits, and I find it enjoyable that this is like her most like self-aware novel. Like we have all of those fourth wall breaks that are a ton of fun. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I was surprised all over again by how much I enjoyed this one. Like I've just been consistently enjoying it more every time I come back to it.
Yeah, it's a really good book. It does read as a first novel, but I think for a first novel, it's a really, really good debut. It wasn't her debut. For those of you who don't know, this book was originally completed in 1803, but it didn't get published until 1817 as a sort of like bind up or companion with her last novel. So it was published after she died. I love Northanger Abbey. It does read like a first book, but for me, it's such an excellent piece of satire. And like you said, Kara, all of the fourth wall breaks are like really funny and humorous. And I think Jane has a lot to say, not just on the Gothic novel, but and if you can't tell, I analyze this book through a feminist lens, but there's a lot to say about how men view media that women enjoy. So I love it. I could talk about it for days, but I also don't want to take up the hour. So I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about this work as a piece of satire? Like, do you think it does its job effectively, or? I can go too. So for me, I think this is excellent satire. I think it both pokes fun at Gothic novels, but also acknowledges that it's a valid medium as well. It contains a lot of sexist tropes. And what I find really interesting is that the characters that you're supposed to like, their favorite novels are novels written by women. So The Mysteries of Udolpho is a book written by Anne Radcliffe, a woman. Whereas John Thorpe, who's our sort of like Gothic villain stand-in, he read The Monk, which if you haven't read it, I recommend it just because it's ridiculous. It's written by this man and it has all these horrible portrayals of women, and there's a lot of violence against women in that book. So I also really like this sort of idea of both making fun of these certain tropes in Gothic novels, but also saying like, it's a good fun as long as you don't take it too far.
Well, and what you were saying earlier about media that is traditionally enjoyed by women, that's something I really picked up on this time. Like, I mean, and this is a discussion that feels like it's always happening in the book community, but I feel like every once in a while it gets especially big. But genres or age ranges that traditionally more women write in them, like romance or like young adult, I feel like I could really connect a lot of what Jane Austen was saying about the way that novels in general were looked down on, with the way that we still treat media that is preferred by women or that people assume is preferred by women as being lesser than or as just being for fun. There's not as much depth to it. And I really like that one. I probably marked the quote actually, but that one part where Jane Austen just goes off on people who don't like novels. It's so satisfying for me to read because she's basically defending all of fiction and the value of storytelling and talking about how important it is for human nature and everything. And I just really enjoyed that. It was very satisfying to read. It's sad that we're still having these conversations, but it's also kind of comforting to know yeah, Jane Austen would have had our back with this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it
that's one
definitely,
of.
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Rhonda.
It definitely reinforces the idea that you can tell a lot by a person by what they read.
Mhm.
And I mean, I read a lot across the board, but if someone were to ask me, like, what's the type of novel or what's the type of book that really, gets you, I think you can tell a lot by the person. So I feel like if you're ever on a first date or you're really trying to get to know someone, a nice icebreaker is like, what's your favorite book?
Exactly.
So,
And if they say the monk, run far away.
and then, right, keep running.
Yeah, that's what I found so refreshing about Henry Tilney as a character, because he seemed to, well, it's still a classic book, but he seemed to kind of challenge the idea that there are certain things that are just for women, and then there are other things that are just for men. And I kind of found it refreshing that we had those two different male characters with different perspectives of what women should do and what men can do. And I liked that bit of conversation about, I think, clothes and books. I really enjoyed seeing that, and I was like, oh, this is so refreshing and nice to see in a classic novel as well.
Yeah. There's a lot about this book that I think is so ahead of its time. Especially what you brought up about Henry Tilney and like his interests. He likes novels, which for the most part were, especially the Gothic genre, was sort of popularized and dominated by women for like the longest time. And even novels weren't considered a legitimate form of art until men started like getting in on that. It was mostly women writing novels. But even the thing about Mr. Tilney loving clothes, which is considered like a feminine pursuit, but he knows about fabrics, he knows like about style and outfits. And I really do like that Jane had this guy who wasn't traditionally masculine or had traditionally masculine interests as the love interest for Catherine.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Catherine, how do you feel about our heroine of the book?
She was frustrating at times. I mean, you feel bad for her, you kind of relate to her, but then, you kind of want to shake her and be like, wake up.
Yeah.
But overall, like the sweetness and innocence, the fact that Mr. Tilney or Henry could like see her innocence, but still not consider her to be like a frivolous person. I think that's part of what made this so ahead of its time, is that men are so, and there were, like you said, there's so many references in the book to how men kind of tossed aside women's opinions, thoughts, what they read, how they dress. And even I think it was Isabel who said, that comment about how men don't think that women can actually be friends or have significant friendships. They're just all kind of frivolous. So I like the fact that even though that she was kind of innocent and I don't want to call her, well, maybe naive at times, that he didn't dismiss her as like, oh, a woman, typical woman. He still respected her, and I think that was a nice thing to see, especially in a book written in the 1800s. Like what? Like, but yeah.
Yeah, I think Catherine was one of the things that really pleasantly surprised me with this reread, because I had kind of this memory of her being a really wishy-washy kind of character, and basically just being like an excuse to tell a gothic story. And I was actually, maybe it's because I went in expecting her to be just like a complete doormat. I was like pleasantly surprised. But I marked a few places where like she shows some backbone. Like she kind of teases Tilney back a few times. And the part that really stood out to me is when the Thorpes like lie to the Tilneys about their walking trip or whatever, and they tell her what she did, and she gets really upset, and she like immediately turns around and goes back, and she says something like, if I won't be convinced to do something I think is wrong, I certainly won't be tricked into it. And she just like leaves them and goes off and like does what she wants because she knows it's the right thing. So she was frustrating at times, like especially the misunderstanding at Northanger Abbey itself. But overall, I was actually pretty impressed with, like, she is naive, she is innocent, she doesn't really understand how society works because she's grown up in a really small area. But like, she's not stupid, like, and she's not like, she does have a personality, and I was like really pleasantly surprised by that this time around.
Yeah.
I saw
Go ahead,
like
Olivia.
I saw her as a happy character, and I really liked that she just seemed to genuinely enjoy things. Like when she came across something she didn't know anything about and she was learning about it. Like I think there's a part with landscapes and like nature, and she's kind of looking around and getting taught all about it. She's so happy and open to it, and I really liked that about her character. And sometimes the narrator bugged me a little bit because it kept describing her as such a simpleton and like putting her down, and I was like, but she's got some good qualities too, and they shine through. And I wanted to kind of defend her a little bit, but she does have her downsides. But I did enjoy how much she seemed to genuinely just want to be happy and want happiness for others.
Yeah, I do really like Catherine, and I think maybe because she is one of Austen's youngest heroines, that I'm a little more forgiving of her being kind of. I mean this in the best sense, but Catherine's kind of a dummy. Like in some cases, like she doesn't always think things through, especially that horrible, like one of the cringiest scenes in anything I've ever read when she just flat out accuses, and I dropped my pen, that's fun, when she flat out accuses General Tilney of murder. Like she's not the brightest, but I do like her. Like you said, Kara, there's this element to her where she's not a doormat. When she's aware of some wrongdoing, she's not going to go along with it. And I also really like how she grows throughout the novel. Like in the beginning, she is so naive. And I do also like reading about her sort of like fantasies, like when she's at the ball and it's like no one stared at her in rapturous wonder and all this stuff, which is how I thought like going to the prom at 17 would have been. Are people going to stare at me in wonder? No, that's not how it works. So I really enjoy Catherine as a heroine, and I think she fits this book so well.
So, I gotta say, just because you mentioned that scene, the cringy scene, it was just interesting how after all this defending the novel and how people, it's not just for women or people you consider to be less intelligent, like novels are all this, then to have it be like the basis of her wild imagination that leads to this, she basically got herself up in a frenzy. So I didn't know if Jane Austen was trying to make, if that was just part of the satire, I guess. But how, like, on one hand, novels lead to great thought and all this, but then it also led to her paranoia. So that was interesting.
Yeah, I think the message, while not entirely, like, it doesn't get messed up. I think it does get a little fuzzy there, but I think the lesson is also, like, novels are a form of escapism. It's pure fiction.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff doesn't happen in real life, but it's fun to think about in a way. Just don't go accusing your boyfriend's dad of murder.
Right, it can be dangerous at times.
Taylor, maybe this was something that you want to have us talk about later, but I do want to point out that the Tilney's father is awful.
Oh, he's trash.
Like, he didn't murder his wife, but he's like a terrible human being.
Yeah.
And, like, that's one of the only things that like bothered me about Tilney is the way he reacted to Catherine's claims. Like, yes, they were ridiculous, but the way Tilney responded was almost like, it was almost like how you would expect someone to respond if somebody accused, like, someone you love who's a really good person of doing these things. And it's like, you straight up admitted that you and your sister live in fear of him. Like, he's so controlling, and like, he even says, like, I marked this quote. So, we're all using different editions, but it's like during that like confrontation scene. And he says, he loved her, I am persuaded, as well as it was possible for him to. We have not all, the same tenderness of disposition, and I will not pretend to say that while she lived, she might not often have had much to bear, but though his temper injured her, his judgment never did. His value of her was sincere, and if not permanently, he was truly afflicted by her death. And like, I don't know, it seems like...
Yeah. He is an awful person. I think part of it is, okay, so what bothered me about that whole scene, and I know was written in 1803, so sensibilities were a lot different. But when Mr. Tilney is like, Catherine, remember that we are English and we are Christians. And I'm like, isn't this what happening about now? We've got slavery. What are we talking about?
I know. I thought that was like totally ridiculous. Like his reason for saying that was dumb is like those things don't happen in England with good Christian people, and I'm like, tell me.
Well,
yeah, I thought that was, and like it was almost like so blatant that I wondered if that was part of the satire too, because when Catherine is thinking about like, yeah, he's right. I mean, you expect this kind of thing in Italy, but not in England. It was like so over the top that I'm like, I can't tell if this is like Jane's perspective coming through, or if she was kind of subtly trying to be like, that's a stupid reason, you know?
yeah, I don't know because, sometimes you're reading a Jane Austen book and her writing style and the way she writes her characters, especially her female characters, is so modern that sometimes a little bit of that late 1700s, early 1800s, like racism or like so on comes out and you're like, oh my God, Jane. So I don't know if that was meant to be like taken at face value or not. I took it as face value, like a little bit of, okay, Jane. So we've got a comment here. That's the part where I DNF'd the book the first time I read it. 14-year-old me was cringing so hard, I just couldn't deal with it. Yeah.
Understandable.
It's a tough part to read.
And I'm sorry, just because I'm having a hard time hearing Kara, can you repeat the section that we're discussing?
We were discussing the scene where she accuses General Tilney of murdering Tilney's mom. And we were talking about how in that section, he's like, remember, we are English and we are Christian, and we know how history works. And so we weren't sure if that scene was meant to be satire because they mentioned like, oh, this sort of thing happens in Italy, but in England, murder never happens. Or if we were supposed to take it at face value and this is just how Jane Austen thought. So.
Well, that's why, to be honest, at that part, I sort of wondered if it was going to turn out that he had murdered her. Like, just because it would have been the perfect setup, like after this big speech about like, we are Christians, we don't do this sort of thing, for him to actually turn out to be like the murder, or like not even if he hadn't murdered her, but just like something horrible that he had done to her. Like, I don't know, like I thought that it would have been a perfect setup, but that's not really Jane Austen, I guess. So I went to a little, back to my mysteries.
You needed a little bit of a good murder in there.
Right, just a little sprinkle of murder.
So we sort of skipped ahead of my questions, but I wanted to circle back and ask, how did you feel about Mr. Tilney as a love interest for Catherine? I know we discussed him a bit, but overall, what were your thoughts of Tilney?
I generally did like him as a love interest because he seemed understanding of where she was at, like mentally, like discovering things and not knowing quite how things work. So for the most part, I did like him. There was some times where I was a bit like, do you want to be a bit more proactive? For example, I think the situation with his brother, and Kathy like stands up to him and is like, what's going on with Frederick and Isabel? Oh my gosh, I'm so bad at names. Isabella, right? Yeah. And then he was like, he didn't really do anything and just was really useless. And that's when I was a bit frustrated and I kind of just wanted to be like, be more proactive, do something. This is someone you're close to who's feeling affected by the situation, who's asking you questions. So sometimes he frustrated me, but for the most part, I did like him as a love interest.
Yeah. Just to like clarify on your point, are you saying like the part when Catherine was trying to get some information out of Tilney about what was going on between his brother and Isabella? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah. I took that as like Captain Tilney was going to like be really nasty with Isabel, like have sex with her or do like a sort of one night stand thing. And Tilney was just trying to protect Catherine because she's a lady and he's a, and he's like, he was trying to like keep that bit from her and try and like, I guess, sort of imply it without implying it.
Yeah, I do get that to an extent. Like, I can understand why you would want to protect someone like that. But I think it's just personally when I'm reading that, like, when someone's asking, I want them to answer directly, simply because I think I've read so many books where miscommunication begins like that. And I was like, don't do this, please. But yeah, it makes
That's
sense.
very valid. Does anyone else have? Sorry,
Oh, yeah.
go ahead.
Just to throw in my 2 cents. At first, I didn't know if I was rooting for him to be the love interest. I didn't know if he was going to be the one to lead her to the love interest, or if he was actually going to be the love interest. I found myself rooting for him toward the end or toward the middle. But maybe I felt the same way as Olivia, that something was a little lacking in, like, I mean, it was good that he was sensible and funny and seemed to be very understanding. But yeah, something wasn't attractive about that, especially because, you know, when she told him what was going on, he was like, you must have misunderstood. No. And then he read the letter from her brother, and like, you don't even know him, but you took his word for it. You know, so I don't know. Just some little things in there that made me kind of be like, what, like, you're just leaving in the middle of all this, or you're not going to do anything, same thing. But all in all, I do think that he was a good match for her, someone that she could be open and honest with, who like understood her level of naivete, who didn't hold it against her. So for me, that kind of made them a good couple.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that they both like books, you know, strongly in their favor as a couple.
They have that to talk about.
Yeah.
I will say I like Tilney, but he's not nearly as memorable as, like, you know, the big Austen heroes. You know, he's no Mr. Darcy. He's no
Mr. Knightley.
Mr. Knightley. Yes, I love it. Mr. Tilney is like the guy you settle down with and get married, but he's not like, okay, he's not hot, you know? And that's how I judge the characters.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Did you say something, R? I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Rhonda?
You can call me Rhonda, by the way. Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah. I was going to say maybe he wasn't quite the hero to her heroine that she was, you know, imagining. Like when we hear those words, we think certain connotations, but I guess maybe in those days it was just not quite the same. But they seem to match. So.
Yeah. Were you going to say something, Kara?
Yeah. Also, by the way, I tried to fix the audio and I'm still.
I can hear you.
You sound much better.
Oh, good. Okay, thank God. I'm so sorry, everybody, about all of that. But yeah, the other thing I was going to say about Tilney and Catherine is I remembered Tilney being a lot more, like having a lot more like really great scenes, and I still enjoyed him. Like I really enjoyed the one where they're dancing for the first time and he's like teasing her about like, oh, I need to ask you like how long you've been in Bath and like have you gone to the theater, and Catherine's like, you don't need to ask me, and he's like, yes I do, like let's do this. Like I really enjoyed the scenes where he's like being really playful and he's just like such a clever character, but he wasn't in the book as much as I remembered him being. Like there were huge like chunks of the story where I'm like, where's Tilney? Like where's Henry? Like she's gonna marry this guy, where is he?
One of the things I do like, though, is that they're basically together from the beginning. Like, most of the book, they're, like, dating or, like, they're just hanging out, and they both know that they like the other one.
Yeah.
I kind of like that. You know, it's kind of like they're dating as opposed to other books where they've known each other for a while and then they fall in love, or they meet and hate each other and then fall in love, and so on. Gretchen writes, I like Tilney overall too. My favorite part was when he was teasing Catherine about the horrors of Northanger Abbey before they went. I thought that part was hilarious, especially when Catherine was, there's a continuation here. All like, how scary, tell me more. Yeah. They're really cute.
Yeah.
And also going off what Kara said about how there's huge chunks of the books where Tilney is not present, I kind of liked seeing so much of the book focused on a friendship. I mean, the friendship has its own storyline as well, but it was so nice to see like two girls being friends and that kind of having such a big moment in the book. I appreciated that as well.
Yeah. Actually, speaking about friendships and so on, actually not really. It's a weird segue, but I want to talk about the novel's villains, so to speak. So we've got actually a lot of villains in this book. We've got Isabella, who I don't see her as a villain per se, but just someone who has a lot of growing up to do. You've got Thorpe, who I hate with all my soul. He's so annoying. You've got Captain Tilney, who's barely in the book, and General Tilney, who is the worst.
The worst. Capitals. The worst.
So if you have any strong thoughts on either of them, even if you want to like curse them out, please do so now.
Let me say this. I think Isabella was a villain, and I think she was almost the worst one because she was, and I felt something from the very beginning, the way she latched onto her. So like I knew that, okay, she wants her brother, like that was obvious. But for someone to befriend you on that level and to talk about, oh, we're going to be sisters and, I do anything for you and you're spending all your time together and sharing all your deep, dark secrets together, just to turn around when you are no longer an advantage to them, you can't do anything for them, and they drop you like a hot potato. I feel like that was more a knife in the back than anything. Like she hurt her family, their family, like her brother, we saw the letter, but we never saw him again. Like he retreated, but I don't know. To me, she was the worst. Like I couldn't. And then to follow up with that letter, like, oh, you might have heard that there was a misunderstanding and please persuade your brother that everything's fine. Like you got the knife in the back and now you're twisting it. Like, to me, that was the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point, that because Isabella is like her villainy is so much more realistic, like a backstabbing friend is something a lot of people have had happen, and it's awful. And I think that's a good point about why Isabella is almost the worst, because she's like, hers is the most personal. Like the things that she does are almost more personal. I think one of the reasons I don't tend to think of her as like the villain of the book or the worst villain is, this is a stupid reason, but I find her hilarious sometimes. Like,
it's really funny.
There's a couple scenes with her that are just like hysterical to me. Like there's the one, and what makes it so funny, of course, is that like Isabella and Catherine are just like wildly different people, and Catherine is so like straightforward and literal, and Isabella is not. She's like this scheming little like monster, and like that scene where she's talking about the two like those two men who were staring at them, and she's like, oh, I don't want them to see me. She's like, quick, let's run out in front of them. And Catherine's like, well, why would we do that? And Isabella's like, just shut up, Catherine, come on. Like, I don't know why, but like I find those scenes like so funny that I think that softens my overall opinion of her, even though that's not really fair. And I feel a little more sympathy for Isabella because, like, given what happened with Captain Tilney, I'm like kind of scared about what's going to happen to her in the future. It's like she's awful, but I'm also like, I don't know. I don't think you deserve to be like cast out of society because Captain Tilney was a jerk, Like,
yeah,
she did still do terrible things. Like, I don't think she's a good person, but yeah.
But she was already working on her plan to, like she went out the next day, like, what? Nothing's wrong. Oh, you thought I was interested in him? What? Like,
that's true.
Meanwhile, like Catherine's brother, had to retreat because he had a real broken heart.
Yeah.
And the embarrassment, and obviously it was different for men and women as far as like the social embarrassment. But he was embarrassed and had to retreat. And so I wouldn't have felt bad if she had to retreat too. But she, she got up the next day and was like, oh.
Yeah.
I
think partly the movie is influencing me a little bit, because in the movie we actually see the aftermath.
Oh yeah.
No, sorry, I won't spoil it. I promise.
Bernie Mulligan does a great portrayal of Isabella.
He does.
She's really good.
I think in the movie it shows a little bit more of like the possible consequences if her like affair or however far this went got out. So I think the movie is influencing me a little bit because it's
Okay.
like, yeah, because it's like she's bad. Like I think Catherine is well rid of her, but I'm also like, yikes, like society is not going to be kind to you after after what happened.
I would also say, especially because I'm assuming she's also a teenager like Catherine. And it's kind of like there are some of those boy crazy teenagers who make maybe decisions that aren't the brightest. And maybe they're not the nicest person. But I think in terms of the other villains, they're much older than she is. And I think there's a little bit of sympathy because at the end of the day, Isabella is a woman and it's not like she can go out and get her own career. You do kind of have to marry up and marry for money. And how I saw it is she just saw another step up the ladder. And was it the right move to make? Probably not. But I also doubt she was in love with Catherine's brother. So
Right. Yeah.
But
I
then,
also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
but then, like, when you're considering the money issue, I'm just throwing a question out there. Does it make a difference that Isabella was money hungry and then the general was also kind of money based? Like, comparing those two, does that make one worse than the other, or are they kind of on equal level because of that?
General Tilney already has money, though, and Isabella has none.
True.
And he
That's
also
true.
has a way to make his own money. Whereas
And it's
she
different
has,
if he was upset about his daughter marrying a man that had no money. But like for your son, it's like, is it really that big of a
yeah.
deal? You know?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, I will say I do agree that Isabella sucks, but I think I am a little bit more sympathetic to her because I'm like, well, she's what, 17? Who hasn't
Yeah.
made terrible decisions at 17?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, we got a lot of comments on our villains. Part of it is just me saying throw John Thorpe away because I hate him.
Yes. Please do.
I don't know if you noticed the scene when he kidnaps her, so to speak, but when he tricks her and tells her like, oh, the he's left and so on, and he takes her on this wild carriage ride through Bath. It's supposed to be sort of reflective of the Gothic kidnapping scene.
Yeah.
Which literally turns him into a Gothic villain. And I love that Jane Austen did that, but also I hate Thorpe.
Yeah.
Like all
It
of
was
the
just
scenes he was in were my least favorites. Sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead, Rhonda.
I feel like we all know a guy like that.
Yeah.
Who feels like he can talk for you or like just, I don't know, make decisions like, oh, okay, like, don't worry, I got this. Like, I know what you want better than you know what you want because I'm a man. Like, it just, he was a good villain.
Yeah.
He was. Or like even the part where he just like he won't shut up about his freaking carriage. Like going like on, and I'm just reading that and it's like we all know guys who just like will not stop explaining things to you. And it's like I'm trapped here.
About your car. Like shut up about your car.
Yeah.
Lots of Thorpe and Isabella hate, and we love to see it. And then of course we've got General Tilney, who is pretty awful.
Yeah, I think he's the one I consider the worst because, and it wasn't written like explicitly this way, but like the more I read the scenes with all of them at Northanger, I'm like, okay, at the very least he was neglectful of his family, but like the fact that they're all scared of him and they're all so unhappy when he's there, and like, I don't know, maybe like I don't want to read too much into it, but it's like he's kind of like low-key abusive, like he never lets them make any decisions. Like his daughter got married to escape him. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. I hate General Tilney so much. Like, because I'm just thinking it's like, especially for Eleanor, it's not like she can leave the house until she does. Like at least Henry has his like parsonage or whatever where he can like leave if he wants to, but like Eleanor is like stuck with him. And yeah, it really upset me this time around, especially because I'm just picturing Eleanor, who's like such a sweetheart, just like being forced to live under this guy's thumb. It made me sad.
Mm-hmm.
I am happy that after Isabella, like the trash friend that Isabella was, she met Eleanor, who's very like sweet.
Yeah.
So before we move on to favorite quotes, because I know we have to wrap up soon, do you have any last minute thoughts or comments or anything?
I am really excited to see the movie.
Me too, actually.
I want to see how close it is to the book, and then I want to, because you have a picture in your mind, but I really want to, like, reading the scenes that were very descriptive about like the room and like the dresser and the closet and the trunk or whatever, and like I feel like that's the kind of thing you really want to see.
Yeah.
But one thing I can say for Jane Austen, across the board, and this book especially, is that so many things hold true for like modern times. As like the backstabbing friend, or like learning to trust again, and then I don't know. It just she was definitely ahead of her time, and I'm really glad that I finally read this book.
I'm happy you read it too.
Yeah.
Do we have any other thoughts, or are we good to go to quotes?
I think I'm good to go. Olivia?
I'm good to go, yeah. I think the only thing that's really surprised me with this book was how long it took for us to get to Northanger Abbey. Not that that's a bad thing, but when it was the title, I was like, oh, we're going to go there. And then they were like, oh, yeah, we're going to Bath. And I was like, okay, what about Northanger Abbey? But then we got there and I did like it. But yeah, it was just a surprise for me.
Oh, I will say one thing. If you're following us throughout the entire read-along, I would love it if you noticed how Bath is portrayed in this book versus how Bath is portrayed in Persuasion, because there is a difference between her first book and her last book.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So does anyone want to share their quote first?
I can share mine. So mine's said by Isabella, and it's kind of ironic that it's said by Isabella because, well, it goes down the drain, but she said, there is nothing I would not do for those who are really my friends. I have no notion of loving people by halves. It is not my nature. My attachments are always excessively strong. And when I read that one, I was like, oh, I really feel the same about my friendships. Like, I'm generally a loyal person, I like to think. And I was like, whoa, this is going to be a great friendship. Can't wait to see where it goes.
Oh, no.
Like, what could go wrong?
Exactly. But yeah, I did like that quote a lot.
Yeah, I think it's funny how you can tell even when she's talking about something completely different, she's like patting herself on the back. She's like, even my feelings are the best feelings.
Exactly.
Does anyone else want to go next? Or?
Okay. This is, I guess, the narrator, but it's when Catherine is talking with Eleanor, and she's kind of left out of the conversation around her because they're talking about drawing and things that she's ignorant of. So this is the quote. When people wish to attach, they should always be ignorant. To come with a well-informed mind is to come with an inability of administering to the vanity of others, which a sensible person would always wish to avoid. A woman especially, if she have the misfortune of knowing anything, should conceal it as well as she can.
Yeah.
I was like, wow,
Yeah.
that was harsh. But I don't know, I feel like I understood her better, like her shame at her ignorance at that moment of not being able to participate, or knowing when to smile, when to agree. Just felt like, it's better to just be ignorant and just stand on the side. Like, I don't know, it was a little sad, but it hit me. Yeah.
Well, and it's very insightful of Jane Austen to be like, some men like stupid women, and like that's how things are sometimes. Like
sometimes it just be like that. Jane Austen.
Yeah.
Not to cheat, but the one I wanted to share, I didn't, because I guess technically it's Shakespeare. Like she, she kind of quoted other authors toward the beginning of the book, and one of them was that and that when a young woman in love always looks, this is the quote, like patience on a monument smiling at grief. And for some reason that just hit me, because I feel like I've been having discussions lately about other books where we feel like women are just expected to know how to carry grief and unhappiness and just put up with it like that's our lot in life. And how, if you're going to love a man, well, this is what you signed up for. And I just hate that narrative. And so just to see it in here is just like, we've been going through this a long time, haven't we? Like,
yeah. Yeah. And then my favorite, or one of my favorites, it's from that part where she just like stops the plot for a second. She's like, let me talk about novels and why they're great. Because there's this one line that I really love. And she's talking as if like a character in a book is defending novels, I guess. It is only Cecilia or Camilla or Belinda, or, in short, only some work in which the greatest powers of the mind are displayed, in which the most thorough knowledge of human nature, the happiest delineation of its varieties, the liveliest effusions of wit and humor are conveyed to the world in the best chosen language. Like, I really love that, because it's like, yeah, fiction is so important, and like fiction can be truthful. Yeah, I just like really like the way she put that, like, yeah, go books.
I love that. That whole like scene was one really crucial to my research paper, so it's really near and dear to my heart. Yeah. But also like it's just such a good part where she goes off. And mine is it's kind of in that vein. So I technically have two quotes. One is the real quote and one is a side quote that we can end on. But the one I have is when they're talking about history books, which it's like that's a masculine book, that's a masculine thing. And it says, I read it a little as a duty, but it tells me nothing that does not either vex or weary me. The quarrels of popes and kings with wars or pestilence in every page. The men all so good for nothing and hardly any women at all. It is very tiresome. And I'm like, oh, yes.
Yeah, hardly any women at all.
I love that. And how it also sort of ties into the little history stories Jane Austen would write, like a history of England. About how there aren't any really women in history and the men are just, I don't know, fighting each other.
Yeah. But
the other one, because I was stuck between two, was the person, be a gentleman or lady, who has not pleasure in a good novel must be intolerably stupid.
Yeah, Gretchen just mentioned that one. That's a great one.
So good. Oh, yeah. Yes, we are on the same wavelength, Gretchen.
Yeah.
So we definitely have to wrap up now. One last time, Olivia and Rhonda, for people who maybe came in late, would you like to plug your channels before we sign off?
Sure thing. I'm from Olivia's Catastrophe, and I mostly just talk and fangirl about books as best I can, as honest as I can.
I'm Rhonda, and my channel is R Alexandria, and there's a lot of booktube. There's a lot of some comedy skits here and there, just general fun.
Awesome. Go ahead and follow them. Thank you so much, everyone who joined in. This was a great discussion and a great way to kick off Austen Anonymous. Don't forget to subscribe to everyone who is here. And I will see you all in our next Austen Anonymous chat, which will be hosted by Kara. We will be reading Sense and Sensibility, and the date is TBD.
Yeah.
We will get around to it when we do.
Yeah, so follow the Twitter.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.